I was scrolling through my feed the other day and came across something. Well, it was truly surreal. It was a clip from the classic romance of the Three Kingdoms, but instead of a gritty battlefield, the characters were inside a high-tech laboratory. And Guan Yu was debating quantum physics in a voice that sounded remarkably like a modern K-pop star.
Chuckles slightly. That sounds about right for the internet these days.
Right, and the comments were just this chaotic mix of, this is genius and this is a digital desecration. The creator was likely basking in the glow of millions of views, probably thinking they'd finally mastered the art of the viral AI magic. But then something shifted. Just as I went to share the link, the video just turned up. It turned into a gray content unavailable screen.
It was gone.
Vanished. And it wasn't just that one video either. Across the major platforms, all those bizarre AI-generated mashups of China's most sacred literary works, you know, the AI magic that had been dominating the algorithm for months, they started disappearing in real time. It felt like a silent digital sweep was happening, just erasing the specific type of creativity that until the day before seemed totally unstoppable.
And that's not a glitch.
Not a glitch or a platform whim. As of today, January 1st, 2026, the rules of the game in China have fundamentally changed. While most people were celebrating the new year, a heavily revised cybersecurity law officially took effect, and it marks this hard line between technological innovation and cultural preservation. On one hand, you have the state pouring resources into AI research and infrastructure. On the other, it just launched a massive month-long cleanup campaign specifically targeting these AI-modified classics, backed by the threat of 10 million yuan fines.
Which brings us to the central question.
It raises this fascinating and, somewhat chilling question. In an age where AI can rewrite history with a single prompt, who gets to decide where the magic ends and the violation begins?
That opening anecdote, it captures the complexity perfectly. It's the clash of a 2,000-year-old literary masterpiece with the absolute bleeding edge of silicon and the state stepping in right at that intersection. Our mission in this deep dive is to really unpack that immediate, almost surreal contradiction.
How is China simultaneously launching this aggressive regulatory crackdown, that digital vanishing act you just saw, while also providing massive, unprecedented state support for foundational AI research and industrial adoption?
It seems like a paradox.
Exactly. This isn't just a story about tightening the screws. It's a really sophisticated dual strategy. We need to understand the mechanism the state is using to balance this aggressive technological ambition, the urgent desire to be a world leader in AI with rigorous cultural data and compliance control. It seems almost impossible to hit the accelerator and the brake at the exact same time.
And yet, that's precisely what they're attempting. To make sense of this integrated approach, we've structured this deep dive around three core pillars that address this duality. First, we'll examine the unprecedented severity of the new compliance regime, the regulatory stick, if you will.
I'll pick a stick.
Second, we'll pivot to the comprehensive industrial support structure and the economic roadmap. That's the carrot. And finally, we'll analyze the specific governance tools targeting generative content and cultural preservation, which gets us the answer to why Guan Yu suddenly stopped his quantum physics debate on January 1st.
All right, let's start there with that first pillar, the regulatory reset. That revised Cybersecurity Law, the CSL, which went into effect January 1st. That's the foundation for all these changes, and it dramatically raises the stakes for every single entity operating in China.
It really does. I mean, this is the first major overhaul of the CSL since it was enacted back in 2017, and it is a genuine watershed moment. It fundamentally changes the risk exposure, moving from a system that, prioritized remediation over immediate punishment to one that demands proactive, high-standard compliance right out of the gate.
We often hear about regulation acting as a handbrake on innovation, forcing companies to slow down, divert capital, and just focus on bureaucracy. But what I find truly fascinating in our sources is the counter-narrative. From people like this Shenzhen tech founder, Liang, he described the revised CSL not as a handbrake, but as guardrails on a high-speed circuit.
And that analogy is absolutely crucial because it speaks to the economic logic behind the regulation. Liang was basically arguing that for years, the legal landscape felt like shifting sands. Startups and major infrastructure investors were hesitant to commit the billions required for foundational AI research, building massive data centers, procuring cutting-edge chips, because the legal risk of a sudden unpredictable policy change was just too high.
So by clarifying the rules, even if they are incredibly stringent, the government is actually providing the predictability that's needed for these massive multi-year infrastructure investments. It's almost like a risk transfer.
That's a great way to put it.
If you comply with the high standard, your investment is now legally protected and stable.
Precisely. The goal isn't to discourage investment. It's to encourage high-standard investment. The law aims to create a stable legal environment that incentivizes companies to build robust, secure data security infrastructure and to commit to long-term foundational AI research. And this perceived stability is what unlocks all that significant venture capital and state-backed funding that previously held back because of regulatory uncertainty.
A key element driving the stability is how the CSL now has this newly clarified integrated stance on data specifically, how it aligns what's been called the data governance triad. How does this amendment formalize that connection between cybersecurity and data privacy?
It creates a fully cohesive legal architecture. I mean, before, you had these laws that were related but could sometimes be interpreted separately. The CSL revision explicitly mandates that cybersecurity requirements must align with the Data Security Law, the DSL, and the Personal Information Protection Law, or PIPL.
Okay, so the CSL, DSL, and PIPL.
Right. These three documents, CSL for cybersecurity, DSL for data classification and protection, and PIPL for personal privacy, are now functionally inseparable. You can't comply with one in isolation anymore.
And the PIPL, which was enacted in 2021, already set a very high bar globally. I remember it established comprehensive rules for things like data minimization, purpose limitation, transparency, and really strict consent requirements.
It did. And the new CSL clause effectively weaponizes that previous legislation. It mandates that network operators must comply with all these existing laws, PIPL, DSL, even the Civil Code, when they're processing personal information. This integration means there's no longer a gap where a company might technically meet cybersecurity standards but fail on privacy consent.
So a failure in, say, data minimization under PIPL is now directly a failure of a cybersecurity obligation under the CSL.
Exactly. And that link is what gives the authorities the regulatory leverage to impose these truly staggering penalties. Which brings us to the financial handbrake. The massive escalation of financial penalties, which is probably the most immediate threat posed by the CSL amendment.
So how has the philosophy of enforcement changed? It wasn't always this punitive, was it?
Not at all. The change here is not just the size of the fine, but the philosophy behind it. Previously, for a first-time violation of, say, cybersecurity or emergency response obligations, an internet operator might just receive a warning and in order to correct the problem. Fines were usually reserved for those who refused to comply after that initial warning.
So you got a chance to fix it. Now, you incur immediate financial consequences, regardless of whether you fix the issue later on.
That's the crucial shift. For a first-time, less severe violation, the penalty starts immediately at 10,000 RMB and goes up to 50,000. That's a clear marker of immediate liability. More significantly, if the company refuses to correct the violation after that initial fine, the penalty increases dramatically, ranging from 50,000 to 500,000 RMB.
Wow.
It's a five-fold jump in the maximum penalty compared to the previous regime. So the cost of just ignoring a warning is now extremely high.
But the truly business-threatening penalties, those are reserved for incidents that cause real, measurable harm. How do the amendments define the severity of consequences, and what are the price tags attached to those?
Right, this is where it gets serious. The CSL amendments provide explicit definitions for two tiers of high-level harm. The first is serious consequences. This is defined as resulting in massive data leaks or a partial loss of function for what's called critical information infrastructure, or CII.
And the penalty for that tier?
For serious consequences, the penalty is between 500,000 and 2 million RMB.
Okay, that's manageable for a massive multinational, maybe, but it's certainly enough to get some serious board-level attention.
For sure. But then you hit the catastrophic tier, or particularly serious consequences. This is triggered by the loss of major CII functionality. The fine here jumps exponentially, ranging from 2 million up to 10 million RMB.
10 million yuan.
And that maximum figure is approximately 1.4 million US dollars. But crucially, the liability extends beyond just the company. The individuals who are directly responsible for these severe incidents, we're talking CEOs, CTOs, security officers, they face personal fines ranging from 200,000 up to 1 million RMB.
So it pierces the corporate veil.
It absolutely makes personal accountability a significant factor in executive decision-making. You can't just write it off as a cost of doing business.
So it's not just the act of noncompliance, but the outcome, the loss of critical function, or that massive data loss that triggers the highest liability tier. What specific behaviors are they really targeting with these maximum fines?
They're targeting negligent and malicious security practices. The maximum fines explicitly cover behaviors like setting up malicious programs or the failure to take immediate remedial measures for known security defects, vulnerabilities, or other risks. If a zero-day vulnerability is discovered, for instance, and the company fails to promptly inform its users and report it to the relevant competent departments, they are now directly exposed to those massive fines. It manages an extremely proactive, real-time security posture.
So if the CSL is designed to establish these guardrails for the high-speed circuit, it's also demanding that every vehicle on that circuit and every piece of maintenance equipment be certified and safe. This brings us to the critical new supply chain and product controls.
This is a major structural shift for the entire IT supply chain. It's not just about how you operate, it's about what you build with. New penalties now target the sale or provision of uncertified critical cyber equipment or dedicated cybersecurity products.
And what happens if you do that, if you sell something that's not certified?
If you sell or provide these products without the required security certification or testing, you face sanctions that include the confiscation of all illegal gains and fines calculated up to 5 times the amount of those illegal gains.
5 times the illegal gain. That moves beyond just recovering profits and becomes a truly punitive measure against cutting corners on certification.
It does. But the impact doesn't stop at the supplier who sells the equipment. It transfers risk right down the chain to the critical information infrastructure operator, the user of that equipment.
And this is where the operational risk just explodes for large firms.
It absolutely explodes.
Yes.
CIOs who use products that have not undergone a security review or have failed it face massive fines. We're talking about fines between 1 and 10 times the procurement amount. So you can imagine a multinational company that procures $1 billion in foundational AI infrastructure, servers, networking equipment, you name it.
Right.
If even a small percentage of that procurement is found to be uncertified, the financial exposure, up to 10 times the cost, is astronomical.
That makes the CIO practically a hostage to the diligence of its global suppliers.
It does. It mandates robust procurement governance and intensive supplier due diligence that has to track the certification status and traceability of every critical piece of technology throughout their supply chain. This is a massive compliance burden, but it serves the state's purpose to ensure that only the highest standard certified equipment forms the backbone of the nation's digital infrastructure.
So the message is crystal clear. The cost of noncompliance is enormous and potentially business-ending. That's the stick. But let's use that high cost of failure as the perfect transition point, because for those who manage to stay within the guardrails, the state offers a powerful engine to race ahead. Let's look at the carrot, how the state is simultaneously fueling this aggressive technological ambition.
This brings us to Section 2, the standardization engine. And this is the other side of the coin. The state has decided that regulatory rigor is not the opposite of innovation. It's the mechanism for innovation. The compliance structure is basically the control system for a massive state-backed engine of AI R&D.
And the CSL revision itself provides the legal justification for this dual push, doesn't it? It introduces an explicit statement of state support for AI R&D through the newly created Article 20, which replaces a previous rather vague commitment.
Yes, that's a key legal anchor for all of this. And the support is very targeted and strategic, designed to address the fundamental bottlenecks in AI development. The state will now explicitly back basic theoretical AI research and the R&D of key technologies, especially algorithms.
And infrastructure.
Critically, it supports the construction of necessary infrastructure, specifically mentioning training data resources and computing power, the raw fuel for large language models. But here is the essential linkage. The support is also earmarked for improving AI ethical norms and strengthening risk monitoring and security supervision.
So receiving support isn't just about showing off a smart new algorithm, it's about demonstrating a compliant and secure infrastructure that supports that algorithm.
Precisely. This linkage means state investment is conditioned on ethical and security advancement. You don't just get money for being fast, you get money for being both fast and safe.
But the ambition extends way beyond the lab. It's about transforming the entire economy. That's the goal of the Artificial Intelligence Plus initiative, or AI Plus.
The AI Plus action which was released by the State Council in August of 2025, is China's national blueprint for massive commercialized AI application. It is explicitly designed to promote large-scale integration across the entire foundation of the economy, targeting pillar industries like automotive, manufacturing, and even consumption upgrading.
That sounds like an industrial policy designed for warp speed. What are the concrete, aggressive goals they've set for the popularization of AI applications across the economy?
The timelines are incredibly aggressive, demanding rapid integration. The goal is for the penetration rate of new generation intelligent terminals and agents to exceed 70% by 2027.
70% in just a couple of years. And what are we talking about here? Intelligent terminals and agents?
Think intelligent robots on factory floors, AI-powered systems in manufacturing, and digital agents assisting in all kinds of services. Then, by 2030, this penetration rate is supposed to surpass 90%, with the intelligent economy becoming a primary growth driver. The final aim is to establish a mature intelligent society by 2035, fully driven by this new intelligent economy.
Achieving 90% penetration of new intelligent agents in just 5 years. That requires coordinated action across every single sector. The strategy involves 6 overarching actions and targets 8 specific capabilities. That sounds less like a suggestion and more like a military operation plan.
It is a roadmap for a total economic reorganization. The 6 actions define the broad application areas, everything from AI-empowered industrial development and consumption upgrading to people's livelihood and global cooperation. The 8 targeted capabilities, on the other hand, define the necessary technical infrastructure.
So the how to the what?
Exactly. They focus heavily on areas like fundamental model capabilities, coordination of intelligent computing power, which is about ensuring sufficient hardware, and critically strengthening data supply and security capabilities. It's an integrated push to ensure the foundational technology can actually scale to meet those aggressive 70 and 90% penetration goals.
And this all ties back to that story of the lead safety officer in Shanghai, Zhang, which perfectly illustrates this new integration of governance and industrial strategy. Compliance, which for so long was just seen as an impediment, is now a prerequisite for competitive advantage.
Zhang's experience is pivotal here. For years, completing mandatory safety supervision protocols and risk assessments was viewed solely as a bureaucratic obstacle, something to be managed to avoid fines. Under this new framework, that perception has completely flipped.
Because his team successfully cleared the mandatory safety supervision protocols, proving they met the high CSL-mandated standards, they were immediately fast-tracked for a new government-backed innovation grant.
That's it right there. High standard safety compliance is now officially a competitive advantage and a prerequisite for industrial support. The state is integrating mandatory risk assessment frameworks directly with industrial support policies, effectively turning secure innovation into a marketable, competitive global brand. The underlying thesis is that the safest, most reliably governed AI systems will ultimately be the most valuable and trustworthy on the global market.
This strategic linkage is formalized in the Governance Framework 2.0, released by the Cyberspace Administration of China, the CMSC, in September 2025. What shift did that framework represent?
It marked a philosophical shift from static compliance to dynamic governance. Static compliance is just checking a box once a year. Dynamic governance means continuous engagement. This framework provides detailed guidance on risk grading and classification, covering everything from data security and system integrity to the ethical challenges inherent in specific AI applications.
So it's more of a living document.
Exactly. And crucially, it explicitly integrates ethical requirements into the technical standards themselves, ensuring safety and ethics are built into the design process from the very start, not simply patched on as an afterthought.
And the state isn't just waiting for some perfect single law to emerge to do all this. They are rapidly developing very specific technical standards.
The momentum is extraordinary. According to the 2024 guidelines, the goal is to formulate over 50 new national and sector standards by 2026. These are the detailed technical instructions that define what secure and ethical AI actually looks like in practice across different industries. Furthermore, they are looking outward, aiming for engagement in international standards development to exceed 20 projects. This isn't just about internal regulation, it's about exporting their governance model and influencing the global framework for AI standards.
I remember previous discussions about a potential overarching artificial intelligence law. Given the speed of these targeted standards and the CSL amendments, is that kind of comprehensive law still in the cards?
That's a great question. While a draft artificial intelligence law was included in the 2024 legislative work plan, the 2025 plan has moved away from it. The current legislative strategy prioritizes flexible, fast application of the existing comprehensive laws, that's CSL, PIPL, and DSL triad we talked about, alongside targeted regulations and standards for specific use cases like generative AI.
Which allows for more agility.
Far more agile governance in a rapidly changing field rather than waiting for a single massive law that could become outdated before it's even enacted.
So the flexibility of targeted standards is currently winning out over the rigidity of a comprehensive law. Let's transition now to how this regulatory rigor applies directly to cultural content, circling back to that initial shock of the vanishing Guan Yu video. This is Section 3, governing the output.
And this is where the cultural control element becomes really visible. That instant disappearance of the AI mashups on January 1st, 2026 was the direct result of a month-long AI mashup video special governance campaign launched by the National Radio and Television Administration, the NRTA.
What exactly was the scope of that campaign? Who were they targeting?
The NRTA campaign was highly focused. It specifically targeted AI-altered content based on China's 4 great classical novels, historical narratives, revolutionary themes, and content involving national heroes or widely respected role models. The authorities were looking for very explicit violations.
Like what?
Manipulated content that misrepresents the original meaning, promotes violence, sensationalism, or vulgarity, and that fundamentally distorts the underlying cultural values of the original work.
It sounds like state-sponsored artistic censorship, which could chill genuine, if perhaps provocative, cultural experimentation.
That is certainly one interpretation and a valid concern. But the sources we looked at offer a critical counter-perspective. Consider this creator from Hangzhou, Xiao Wei, who specializes in high-quality, AI-assisted recreations of classical works like Dream of the Red Chamber. She viewed the governance campaign as a necessary rescue mission to clear out what she called digital sludge.
Digital sludge! That is a powerful image.
It is. For creators like Xiao Wei, the endless stream of low-effort, vulgar, and frankly nonsensical mashups, like Guan Yu debating quantum physics in a K-pop voice, was burying genuine artistic and cultural evolution. She felt that enforcing clear boundaries, authenticity standards, and transparency was necessary to restore dignity to cultural content in the digital age. It's an argument that quality control, in this case enforced by the state, is necessary for cultural evolution to thrive without being overwhelmed by garbage content.
And the primary tool for enforcing this cultural cleanup is mandatory labeling, making it impossible to confuse AI-generated content with reality or authentic history.
Correct. This whole practice is standardized by the measures for the labeling of content generated by artificial intelligence, which came into effect in March 2025, and it's backed by a mandatory national standard, GB 45438-2025, effective September 2025. These documents basically move the responsibility for authenticity from the platform to the creator and the AI service provider.
The labeling requirements are clearly divided into 2 forms, explicit and implicit. We all understand explicit labeling, a visible watermark or text saying AI generated. But why is the implicit labeling so critical for traceability and fraud prevention?
Implicit labeling is the real key to the anti-fraud mechanism. It involves embedding identifying information, a digital fingerprint, directly into the metadata of the AI-generated file itself. This means that even if a user crops out the visible watermark, the explicit label, and shares the video or image somewhere else, forensic tools can still extract the embedded metadata.
And that metadata would confirm not only that it was AI-generated, but potentially who generated it and where.
Exactly. The system is designed to provide forensic traceability across the entire internet, regardless of how many times the content is altered or reshared. It answers the 3 critical governance questions. What content is generated? Who generated it? And where was it generated?
And these sophisticated labeling rules, they work in coordination with the foundational interim measures for the administration of generative artificial intelligence services from back in 2023.
Right. Those 2023 generative AI measures are the bedrock. They mandate that generative AI service providers must guarantee the authenticity, accuracy, and objectivity of their content outputs. They also heavily reinforce the PIPL data compliance requirements we discussed earlier, making providers obtain clear consent or have other legal bases for using personal information to train their algorithms, and they have to provide clear opt-out options for users whose data is being used.
So it weaves content moderation and cultural sensitivity directly into the underlying algorithm design and training process.
That's the goal.
Now let's pivot from historical mashups to the professional future of communication. We can see the intended direction of this human-machine symbiosis by looking at the role of AI anchors, like the ones that were used so extensively during the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics.
AI anchors are a perfect demonstration of the advantages of AI in dynamic media tasks. They offer extreme efficiency, negligible cost compared to human talent, and, crucially, true 24/7 service. That all-day availability is essential for dynamic, continuous tasks like real-time weather forecasting, live streaming, or providing instantaneous sign language translation for global events.
The efficiency must be incredible.
The sheer efficiency in script generation alone is unmatched. I mean, creating logical, interactive scripts in real time based on audience comments during a 2-hour live stream is something a human team would struggle with.
So AI handles the volume, the speed, and the data crunching. That leaves the big question: what remains absolutely irreplaceable about the human anchor?
This brings us to a core philosophical concept called embodied cognition. AI anchors are based on data calculation and pattern recognition. Human anchors, however, possess unique, personalized images, charisma, and an emotionality that is rooted in a deep cultural context that AI simply cannot replicate.
Tell me more about embodied cognition in this context. It's not just about sounding emotional, is it?
It's far more than that. It's the ability to demonstrate culturally contextualized, spontaneous judgment. For example, a human anchor can subtly adjust their tone, their pacing, their vocabulary based on the nature of the news, expressing appropriate sympathy for a disaster report or genuine, unscripted excitement for a scientific breakthrough. This requires an understanding of societal norms and a deep emotional intelligence that AI, which is fundamentally a prediction engine, lacks. Human anchors establish that crucial, nuanced, emotional connection with the audience.
So the argument is that the development trend isn't replacement, but a kind of complementary cooperation.
Exactly. Human-machine symbiosis is the goal. The AI handles the high-volume, continuous, data-intensive tasks, maximizing dissemination efficiency. The human anchors focus on tasks requiring that embodied cognition, charisma, emotional resonance, nuanced judgment, and the ability to spontaneously adapt based on complex social and cultural understanding. These are qualities that are extremely difficult, if not impossible, for current AI models to genuinely learn or replicate quickly.
As this technology continues to integrate globally, this dual strategy of high-stakes compliance and industrial support naturally leads to critical questions about liability, especially across borders. That takes us to our fourth section, the scope of liability and extraterritorial reach.
The CSL amendments have significantly increased the geopolitical risk for international firms by broadening the extraterritorial reach of Chinese law.
How was the law limited before? What was the old scope?
The former provision primarily targeted overseas activities that caused direct harm specifically to China's critical information infrastructure, the CIIs. It was pretty narrowly focused on infrastructure attacks.
And the revised law?
It vastly expands the scope. It now covers any overseas institution, organization, or individual that engages in activities endangering the cybersecurity of the People's Republic of China more broadly, regardless of whether a CI is directly harmed or not. This signals a much more proactive and assertive cross-border posture for enforcement against a wide array of cyber threats or activities that are deemed harmful to national digital security.
And if those overseas activities result in serious consequences, the implications for the international entity or the individual can be extremely severe.
Absolutely. The public security authorities and other competent departments are now empowered to impose sanctions, including freezing assets or taking other necessary restrictive measures against the overseas entity or individual involved. For multinational companies, particularly those in the tech sector with global operations and assets, this significantly elevates the need to assess any offshore cybersecurity risks that might be related to China's national interests.
Moving from geopolitics to product safety, what happens when an AI system itself is the thing that causes harm? We noted that current Chinese law lacks an explicit, dedicated rule for defining liability for a defective AI system.
That's a key legislative gap, but it's probably intentional for now, given how fast the technology is changing. The regulatory focus remains strongly preventative, requiring risk assessments, compliance with security standards, and clear labeling before deployment. If harm does occur, there isn't some specialized AI court to handle it.
So, if a system malfunctions and injures someone, civil liability just defaults to the existing general tort law.
That's the rule. Liability is determined based on fault that's attributed to the developer, the deployer, or the user. Courts evaluate fault by looking at whether the entity complied with its regulatory obligations. Did they establish a functioning complaint mechanism? Did they disclose potential risks? Was the content properly labeled? The plaintiff, the victim, generally bears the burden of proving that the developer or deployer was at fault.
However, there's a critical distinction when personal information is involved, right? This is where the integration of the PIPL comes back into play.
This is a major structural shift for companies managing large data sets. Under general tort law, if you sue an AI developer over a broken, fault-based product, you have to prove their negligence. But under the personal information protection law, if an infringement of personal information causes damage, say, a massive data breach fault is presumed on the handler.
So the burden of proof shifts entirely.
It completely reverses the burden. The personal information handler has to assume liability unless they can affirmatively prove that they were not at fault. This is a massive legal incentive for companies to invest heavily in data protection infrastructure and compliance, because they have to recognize that in the event of a breach, they are legally considered guilty until proven innocent.
That is a crucial distinction for the legal calculus of any company operating within this ecosystem. Let's switch gears a bit to the creative side. What about intellectual property rights? Specifically, can an AI be named an inventor on a patent application in China?
The short answer is no. China's legal framework is very clear that patent rights are civil rights, and those rights can only be held by natural persons or legal entities. The China National Intellectual Property Administration, the CNIP, confirms that only natural persons can be listed as inventors. AI systems are not currently recognized as civil subjects, and so they can't hold or enjoy associated civil rights. The human intellectual contribution is required.
Speaking of human contribution, how is the legal system handling copyright protection for images generated by AI? This has been a heavily debated topic globally.
China's courts are moving toward recognizing that AI-generated images may be eligible for copyright protection, but, and this is a big but, only if they clearly reflect the user's original intellectual input. That standard is key.
So the creation of the image isn't enough. The human input has to be demonstrable. What exactly does the court look for to define this intellectual input?
Well, authorship is typically attributed to the user, but the user has to prove they were more than just a passive prompter. Courts have focused on the user's process of selection and refinement of prompts, or the rigorous selection from multiple AI outputs, as demonstrating that necessary original intellectual input. For example, did the user make specific choices regarding content, color palette, layout, and composition? Simply providing a vague idea and a prompt is usually not sufficient, as mere ideas aren't copyrightable expressions. The courts are demanding specific, creative, human curation.
Finally, let's talk about data scraping. It's the foundational activity that fuels most of this generative AI. Is it strictly regulated, or is it a kind of Wild West scenario?
It's definitely not a Wild West scenario, but it is also not strictly prohibited. Courts judge the legality of data scraping on a case-by-case basis through a comprehensive examination of several factors. They're trying to balance the need for data utilization with the protection of platform stability and intellectual property.
What are the main factors the courts use in this test?
First, they look at the competitive relationship. Does the scraping party directly compete with the scraped website? If so, the standard of scrutiny is much higher. Second, the nature of the data. Is it public data, or does it involve personal or copyrighted data? Third, the legality of the scraping methods used. Bypassing technical access restrictions like cracking verification codes or IP limits is considered illegal access under the CSL.
And what else?
Fourth, adherence to the scraped website's robots, protocols, or user agreements. If the site clearly states no scraping, that weighs heavily. And finally, the impact of the scraping. The scale of the data taken, whether it caused an improper operational burden on the scraped website, slowing down the servers for legitimate users, or if it harmed consumer interests or data utilization efforts.
And those website terms of use that try to prohibit scraping entirely, are they always enforceable, even if the data is publicly available?
That's a great nuance. Courts acknowledge that a website can legally prohibit the unauthorized use of scraping software to obtain data. However, judicial practice generally follows a principle of reasonableness and good faith. While a website can protect its technical systems, access to publicly available data must still be permitted within reasonable limits. They can't use a ban to monopolize public information. Enforcement regarding scraping, particularly for massive AI training datasets, is one of the most intensely reviewed areas by the courts right now.
This has been an incredibly detailed look at how China is re-engineering its digital economy at a breakneck speed. Let's try to synthesize this dual strategy.
The central theme really is the integrated and high-stakes nature of this governance. The CSL revision and all the subsequent policies, they don't operate in isolation. They form a mutually reinforcing legal ecosystem. We see the state using regulation, the compliance stick, to demand unprecedented accountability, transparency, and cultural adherence.
But in return, that very same mechanism unlocks massive support and industrialization efforts, the carrot, the AI plus action, the rapid standardization efforts, and that direct link between mandatory risk assessment and fast-tracked grants all confirm this strategy.
The key takeaway for you to consider is that compliance is not being treated as a cost center. It's being framed as an enabling mechanism for state-backed competition. You prioritize market access and funding only if you demonstrate robust compliance and ethical standards. They are attempting to make security and ethics an essential feature of their technological edge.
The ultimate implication of this strategy is profound. By establishing what is arguably the world's most demanding integrated compliance regime, China is trying to prove that the world's most competitive AI, the AI that will transform the global economy, can only be achieved by building the world's most compliant and ethically sound AI. The integration of governance and industrial policy represents a unique global experiment, attempting to redefine success in the technology race through rigorous state-mandated accountability.